And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here on AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
Right away I have to start with a little note because last week I appended a note to the show about Chris Cyborg. You weren't here for that. We had previously recorded the show before the news that Chris Cyborg failed or potentially failed USADA out of competition drug test had broken. So we talked a lot about Chris Cyborg on last week's show. I had to break the news on the replay once it came out on YouTube. And as it turns out since then, the drug that she allegedly tested positive for was a diuretic, which she says was medically necessary because of the very difficult weight cut that she had to get to 141 for her fight with Nina Landsberg, which questions whether she could ever get down to 145, which ironically is what I said on the show, is that she's probably not even getting to 145 anymore, and then she gets popped for this failure in an out-of-competition test, and that just sort of proves the point. If she needs all these drugs to be able to restore her health just from trying to get down below 145, she probably ain't even getting down to 145 at any point in the future. But as it turns out, that's not the only USADA violation that we have to discuss. And for the latest news on Josh Barnett, I turn it over to my co-host, Peter H.
Sadly, this one, for some reason, still surprised me. Josh Barnett has failed a fourth drug test in his MMA career, and let's just say the commissions don't like it when you fail more than one.
We have to say potentially when we say this, because USADA notifies UFC and the fighter of their sample testing positive, but that is barring a second confirmation from the B sample if they request it.
For some reason, I had flashbacks to Frank Mir because we haven't heard a peep from him since basically if I'm positive for drugs, so I'm going to retire, and we haven't heard anything from him, so Barnett, fourth failure. We saw him fight in September the last time we saw him, and I don't know. I mean, there's rumors that if he does end up, testing positive on his B sample, the only promotion that I think would hire him would be Ryzen at this point. So, and we'll talk about Ryzen because there's a note about them actually in the news this week. But Stevie, are you surprised about the fourth failure for Barnett potentially, or is this more shrug your shoulders and move on?
I can't say I'm shocked because we know his track record going all the way back to his early UFC days when he was stripped of the heavyweight title for failing a drug test. So that was under much less stringent testing conditions than USADA offers today. So would it really be shocking at this point? No, you would hope that maybe in this new, more stringent drug era, and the fact that he's advancing in age, and the fact that he's also got other outside interests that a drug test failure could affect him on, such as being a commentator for New Japan on Access TV or doing pro wrestling shows in Japan, you would think he wouldn't want that kind of spotlight or that black mark on his record at this point in his life. But given his past history, can you call it a shock? You really can't.
Now, does this stop him from doing commentary, though?
I guess it depends on whether they take the WWE view. Like Brock Lesnar, when he failed, they were like, well, that's somebody else's business, that's somebody else's promotion, that's somebody else's failure. That doesn't really apply to us. We don't have to consider it. So I guess you can look at a drug test failure in UFC and say, well, that doesn't affect his pro wrestling career in Japan or his commentary for New Japan on Access, but that just depends on the attitude of the person signing your paycheck.
Last time I checked, he was still ranked in the top 15.
Well, where is he?
Does this basically kick him right out?
Well, if you're suspended, you're kicked out, but that has to come from the ranking personnel that send us the emails like, here's how you rank a fighter, and here's what you rank them up, and here's what you rank them down, and here's whether they can be ranked. And by the way, with an asterisk, this fighter is no longer eligible for the rankings. They always tell you that. So that advisory, which we should be getting any day now since UFC 207 is coming up, that will be very interesting to see if they've deemed him ineligible for the rankings. I suspect they probably will, and he'll drop out after the next ranking cycle when Rousey and Nunes fight. We will probably no longer be able to rank him.
Actually, as of this recording, he is not listed in the top 15 for heavyweight at all.
Then they've probably done it already, but they haven't emailed us to tell us that they did.
In fact, everybody's moved up one spot, starting at Mark Hunt, going up number 6, and they've brought up to number 15, Luis Henrique. Yeah, it just says Luis Henrique on my screen.
All right. The point is, they did this without notifying us, the actual voters. So when we get the ranking advisory for UFC 207, as I already said, it will have, with an asterisk next to it, due to his suspension, Josh Barnett is no longer eligible to be ranked. Okay, I'm telling you how they word it. You're telling me what we both know it is. So they treat it like it's actually fully formalized, and then pending the appeal, he can be reinstated to the rankings. Because if you successfully appealed, and how many people have actually done that, but if you did, you could be reinstated.
Yeah, because I don't see... We talked about Frank Mir a couple minutes ago, and Mir's not even in the top 15. So there's two fighters that are in their, late 30s now, or even later, and them fighting again in UFC now with USADA in the mix and new ownership in the mix. These are two of the good old boys. I'm not going on much of a limb here by thinking they're both done in UFC.
We did talk about this being Barnett's fourth failure, but his last failure, I mean, his first two were in UFC before he left. Once before he fought for the title, once after he beat Randy Couture. Where was that fourth failure? Because I thought that entry I was reading was actually about him. Okay, no, here it is. In 2009, Barnett fought Gilbert Yvel at Affliction Day of Reckoning. The fight was officially pulled 10 days before the show after Barnett failed for anabolic steroids. So it wasn't in Pride. It was in Affliction.
So let's move on to, we talked about Cyborg, we talked about Barnett. Let's talk about another fight that got canceled, and it'll lead into a show we're going to talk about as the main event of tonight's podcast, and that is Cain Velasquez.
Yes, and this all stems from an interview that he did. He actually put the kibosh on his own fight without meaning to. He did a radio interview where he said, "Yeah, I'm feeling like crap right now. I can barely walk. I've got pain shooting down my leg, and I'm going to need back surgery after my next fight." Well, the Athletic Commission got wind of that and said, wait a minute, if you're in that bad of shape, you shouldn't be fighting. And so he went and saw a doctor and got a doctor's clearance and presented it to the Athletic Commission and said, see, I was cleared by my doctor. They say I'm good to fight. And they just said, no, you're not. We don't buy it.
So the problem is, like, if there was a timeline on this, it went with his doctor cleared him, and then a half hour the commission made the announcement the fight was canceled because of the medical history of Cain Velasquez. How Cain was told about this was through the media. You would think someone would call him before it hit the wire that, hey, the commission's on the phone, they want to talk to you. Oh crap, what do they want now? To find out through the media, it reminds me, and Canadians are going to love this example. If you ever watch the trade deadline shows in the NHL, when they call, say, the goaltender for the Detroit Red Wings, hey, so how do you feel about playing now in Columbus? What are you talking about? I haven't been traded. Oh. Like, some guys just, get pulled off the ice in practice because they have no idea, and there's TV cameras on the ice. Why did so-and-so just got pulled off the ice? You would think there'd be a little more heads up than the media calling you to get your opinion on why or how do you feel about just getting traded? And it's like, let me get a minute to collect my thoughts here. It's just very somebody dropped the ball, and I'm not sure who to pin the blame on.
Indeed.
So, now, I could talk about who they wanted to give Verdum as a last-minute opponent, but I want your opinion before I have my 2 cents on it. They called JDS, and JDS was game, and Verdum's like, no. I'm not sure who wins that fight.
At this point, that is a little bit hard to say.
I know JDS is training for a fight, so it's not like he's coming in cold here, but if that was a short fight, very quick turnaround, and with the stakes that they have in mind, I don't think it'd be a fair fight to either fighter, and Verdum is like, you know what? Kane can't fight. I want to fight the champ. I'm the de facto number 1 contender. I don't have a problem with that, to be honest. You?
No, I wouldn't have had a problem with it. And you're right, it's an incredibly unpredictable fight given their respective recent histories and fights. You cannot say how that fight would go with any degree of certainty, but I guess I can't be upset that it wasn't put together on that short of a notice.
If it was a fight with no real, prize for the winner, that's one thing. But you're talking about the next number 1 contender for the title here, so you really have to let both guys who are competing for that spot ample time, full training camp, or at least more than 2 weeks' notice.
I agree.
That's a lot. That's a very big pot of gold at the end of that rainbow, so to speak. Now, what do you think about... we'll talk about Ronda Rousey and Manny Nunes not doing press for the big show this Friday night, I should say.
Oh, you just made the same mistake they made in the commercials promoting the pay-per-view. Did you catch that?
Oh, I did not. That was an honest slip of the tongue there.
No, but the commercials did the exact same thing. The commercials that they aired during football on Fox this weekend said UFC 207, Rousey versus Nunes, Saturday, December 30th. And Dave Meltzer was like, what? How do you make that mistake? And Brian was trying to defend it they could just re-air the pay-per-view the next night. And Dave's like, there's already going to be spoilers. It's a live event. People will have wanted to see it live. Nobody's going to care about a replay.
No. Unless it's the best show of the year and they just replayed the Toronto show and they said Dana White had a surprise and they gave a free, basically replayed the best fights on Fox and it was a decent rating because it was one of the best shows of the year.
Yeah.
But replaying the pay-per-view the night after, not so much.
And I have to admit, I got a kick out of that because I was home for the holidays, as many of us were, and my dad was just flipping channels on his cable box, and all of a sudden, he came across Max Holloway and Anthony Pettis. I'm like, Dad, leave it here for a few minutes. This is really good. You're going to want to see this.
Did he like it?
Yeah, he enjoyed it. He watched the whole fight with me.
All right, so let's move on to some more news. Jeremy Stevens wants to fight Clay Guida.
Okay, well, I think that Jeremy Stevens would have more to lose than to win in that fight because Clay Guida could use a big win like that.
Talk about a rebound fight, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, how do I say this? Odds that Brock Lesnar comes back to UFC.
I think given his drug test failure and his suspension, about 0.
Now, do you think the new ownership would want him to fight again, or is Dana White saying he's not worth the trouble?
I think you just write it off as a loss, saying, well, we brought the guy back, but he really is doing pro wrestling now, and they let pro wrestlers put anything they want in their bodies and don't really check, which you and I both know isn't actually true, but Brock Lesnar gets away with that sort of thing because he's a part-timer, not a full-timer. So they kind of gave him an exemption that most people in professional wrestling don't get. Be that as it may, they're going to take one look at him and go, nah, that guy can take stuff that USADA won't let you take, so forget it.
Now, we talked about Verdum and Dos Santos, and Verdum turned down the fight because he basically is the de facto number one contender by Cain Velasquez's medical issues. Apparently, I misspoke because Verdum, according to a source, says that he did accept the fight against Dos Santos on Friday's show, but under Verdum's terms, and their UFC's like, no.
What were his terms?
That's the thing. It's from a representative, so I'm really not, you know what I mean? Until I hear more than just a representative saying it, I mean, what apparently the long and the short of it is, he turned it, basically, he said sure, but under his terms, UFC said no, and Verdum is now looking forward to his title shot in April, which gives him lots of time to train for a rematch here.
So what you're saying is they didn't even reveal the terms.
I'm trying to see here in my notes.
I mean, it could all be bull, but I want to even hear what the bull crap is. Like, whether they're making it up or not, let's hear it. Let's hear what
here it is. Guaranteed title shot with the win in other, quote, other financial terms.
So he wanted extra compensation, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
I don't know. If I was UFC, I might have given that to him.
You think so?
To make the fight?
I think he would have.
To make it happen? I'd have paid him extra.
You think he would have pulled a Jarrett and said, I'll fight in this fight, but you gotta pay like double what I'm supposed to make?
Well, Jarrett has disputed the veracity of that story.
Okay. But to hold him up for ransom to fight a completely different fighter from Velasquez to JDS, though?
Yeah, well, like I said, Jarrett disputes that. He says he didn't hold anybody up, and if they didn't want to pay him, they wouldn't have paid him.
Well, at the end of the day, it's he said, she said, but I just used that.
Yeah, kind of is the same thing with this. I mean, okay, since it's his representative saying that, do we really know? I mean, it's he said, she said. UFC can say one thing, his representative can say another, Dos Santos can say a third. How do we really know? It's all secondhand word of mouth. There's none of this verified by anybody.
So, April seems so far away, but I'm glad that, you know, he's going to get his title shot.
Mm-hmm. Unless he gets hurt between now and then or pops a drug test.
Shh, don't say that. They might hear you.
Are you really going to be shocked if that happens? I mean, look at the things that have been going on.
Well, no, but you don't say it. That's just tempting fate.
Yeah, I suppose so, but I don't feel like it's tempting fate when it just keeps happening over and over again. You have to come to expect it.
Alright, so let's move on to, let's go a little bit different this week. We're going to go with a show on December 31st, then we're going to backtrack to the 30th, because UFC is going to be the big show of this weekend, but World Series of Fighting is putting out all the stops for this show, that's for sure.
Yeah, they're putting on such a big show that nobody seems to even know it's taking place.
The prelims, Stevie, has a middleweight title fight. That's
right. David Branch defending the title against Louis Put the Guns Down Taylor.
19-3 versus 13-3. So these guys definitely know how to win. And
I think the more wait, before you move on, I think the more interesting fact about this is that Louis Taylor, in his last 5 fights, has finished 5 straight guillotine chokes. 5 in a row.
Yeah, but Branch is going to be, wary of that, though.
Branch is also going to be bigger than him because he fights at both middleweight and light heavyweight since he's the dual weight class champion. So, just because he weighs in at 185 on the day of the weigh-ins, don't assume that he's not going to be not only 205, but probably bigger than that. So, Louis Taylor is going to be at a significant size disadvantage.
I don't think he's going to go 20 pounds.
Yeah, I do.
No, I don't think. Maybe 10.
I bet you David Branch is 210 on fight day.
He's going to balloon up 25 pounds in one day.
If all he has to do is get down to 185, his body can recover water weight pretty quick.
That's a lot of water weight, though.
Yeah, well, we've seen other fighters do it before. We've seen fighters put on 20 pounds between the fight and fight day.
True, we've seen it. I hope I don't see it. I hope it's more... I know it's going to sound weird to say, but I hope he's more respectful of the middleweight title to fight somewhere close to a middleweight.
Actually, I don't even see how that applies, because how is it disrespectful if you can make the weight and then be as big as you want? Because that is essentially the goal that every fighter has right now. I mean, we can argue about whether it's safe. We're talking about Cyborg earlier on the show, whether it's safe to cut to those kind of weights, but I don't see how it's disrespectful to cut to a weight and be as big as possible if your body can actually do it.
Well, why can't they just have the weigh-ins on fight day?
Because that's going to be a safety issue with fighters being dehydrated as they step into the cage for a fight, because fighters are still going to cut weight. At least this time you're giving them a chance to recover that before they get in the cage.
Or they just fight at the normal weight.
You're never going to solve this problem. How many years have we been doing this show, Peter? How many times
6.
How many times have we been over this? We can't solve this problem. The athletic commissions can't solve this problem. You know, One Fighting Championship is trying to solve this problem, but they're way over there across the world, and they're not really affecting what's going on here, save for maybe California, who's like experimenting with the idea of fighters having a natural weight, but even they are kind of still on the cutting edge of it. Nobody's solved anything.
Now, we're just going to jump around to the main card here because there's 2 other title fights.
There's 4 title fights. 4 total.
4 total. There's 3 on the main card. But I want to talk about Marlon Moraes against Josenaldo Silva in a fight that... Is it wrong I want to go with Silva in this fight?
You're not totally out to lunch on that, because what we know is what we don't know. Josenaldo Silva is making his World Series of Fighting debut, which means he is a bit of an unknown quantity for this audience. But what we do know, if we look at his record, is he's got 15 knockouts and 25 wins. Quality of that competition is up for debate. But 15 out of 25 is pretty darn impressive.
Usually I go with the guy who has experience in the big promotions, not someone, because if the record's in question, I tend to stay away, but I really am tempted to pick Silva in this one just because for a title, they wouldn't bring in a scrub for a title fight on one of the biggest shows of the year for the promotion.
On the flip side of that, though, it's not like Marlon Moraes hasn't faced good competition. In fact, he's been so dominant, he's cleared out all of the competition that World Series of Fighting had to offer him, which is why they had to go outside of their own organization and bring in somebody new. So you look at that as a sign of weakness, and I look at that as a sign of strength. Like, why should I doubt the champion when he's already beaten all the best that they had?
Let's move on to a fight that I have circled on my calendar since it was announced.
I'm sure you're not talking about Fitch and Shields. You can't possibly be that excited about it.
I'm excited, not for the fact it's going to be a good fight, because it won't be. I'm just curious how bad this fight's going to be.
You may actually be completely out to lunch.
You think so?
Well, if you're looking at 2 guys who have styles that tend to neutralize other fighters they fight, what's going to happen when you put the 2 of them against each other? They can't just neutralize each other, because they're used to doing that to other people. But when they're fighting a guy that does the same thing that they do, they're going to be forced to try something else. Like, John Fitch can't just wrestle him to the ground for 5 rounds and And Shields can't just take him down and try to go for submissions for 5 rounds. Like, something's going to have to change. One of these guys is going to have to change up their game. And what you might actually get, believe it or not, is a stand-up slugfest because they both know they can't just use the same old tricks.
So, you're saying there's a chance this fight could be good?
I would go just saying that it's going to be a crappy fight and assuming you can skip it. You may actually be pleasantly surprised. I'm not promising that. I'm just saying the possibility that they both have to really turn in something we don't usually see from them is in the making there.
Let's go. Well, I'm curious, but from a morbid standpoint as opposed to an actual excited standpoint. Speaking of exciting fights, Paul Bradley and Yushin Okami. This one I'm more curious for because over the years I've actually liked Okami in some of the fights that he's been less than favored in, thinking that he could really step up. And Paul Bradley, a win against him, man, that's huge.
Bradley, being that he is a recent jump from Bellator to World Series Fighting, would definitely like to prove himself, but speaking of guys that tend to ruin other fighters, Okami is not the guy that you just roll through. Okami is a very difficult and frustrating fighter to fight. He's very capable of making you fight his game, circle with him, exchange with him, not get takedowns, outpoint you, and then take you down. Okami is very good at making you fight his fight.
Yeah, his game plan, he's sticking to that script, and if you don't like it, try to change it, but Okami is more entertaining than other fighters who will force their game plan on you and pin you to the mat for 5 rounds.
Right. He's not just a boring out-wrestle you hump fest, but he's capable of forcing you to go to positions you don't want to be in.
Now, Stevie, I'll leave the floor to you for the main event because I know how much you're a big fan of Justin Gaethje.
Yes, one of the most exciting fighters in the business today. Pound for pound in the lightweights, I would rank him with anybody in UFC or Bellator.
And his opponent?
Well, Luis Firmino is a replacement fighter because originally he was supposed to face Joao Zeffirino, who withdrew for medical reasons, which is the second time that's happened to Gaethje in the last few months because he was also supposed to fight Ozzy Dugulgov in Kansas City, and Ozzy had such a difficult time making weight and being medically cleared for the fight that they scrapped it after he weighed in. So this is now the third opponent that Gaethje has had, but the thing is, I don't think it hurts Gaethje in this case because if there's one thing that both Zeffirino and Firmino had in common, it's their submission expertise. So all Gaethje really needs to do is use what he has from his just outstanding wrestling background, which, you know, he doesn't really wrestle opponents to the mat, but he has that in his arsenal. So all he has to do is use it to stuff takedowns, block takedowns, sprawl his way out of takedowns. And as long as he doesn't go to the ground with Firmino, he's probably going to be okay because he's got great stand-up and he can take his opponent down if he wanted to, not that he usually does. And what we do know is he's got devastating power in his hands and he's got incredible leg kicks. So you do not want to stand with Justin Gaethje for long. The thing that's the most impressive / dare I say awesome about Justin Gaethje is that he is not afraid to take a punch to give a punch. And he goes in there with some of the badasses of that weight class and just says, you want to throw down with me? Like Luis Palomino. That guy hits like a Mack truck, and he said, I'll take your best shot. I'll take him in 2 fights. If you think you can knock me out, go for it, because I'm going to hit you harder than you hit me. And since he is 16-0, I think it's fair to say that so far nobody has proved Justin Gaethje wrong. Now, we both agree that nobody stays undefeated forever, That's how we got to the point we're at with Ronda Rousey right now. But I don't see Gaethje losing this one.
I hate to say this because I like the guy. I would love to see him in UFC, where I think he would be a top 5 fighter. I think he destroys everybody in the bottom 10 of that ranking, but I'm not sure how much longer we're going to see Gaethje in World Series.
I think
I know he loves that promotion. I get it. I understand it. They treat him very well there. But at some point, UFC is going to come knocking, if not Bellator.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, if his contract comes up for renewal, he'd be a fool not to shop himself around and get the best deal. And when it comes to that, I'm pretty sure that the other two organizations can offer a little more money.
And there's great opponents in both promotions, but you know, I know I'm putting my fantasy booker hat on here, but there's a fighter at 155 that wears a cowboy hat. That would be great for them.
Yeah, although he's having so much success at welterweight lately, I don't know that he even wants to get to 155.
I'm not saying put him up against Conor, but you know, there are some very tempting fights at UFC, and not discounting Bellator. Bellator's got some great 155ers as well that would have the casual fans even their interest perked up on this one.
True.
All right, so let's talk about UFC 207, the night before World Series. Nunes, Rousey.
Yes. I was just going to say, it's not Saturday, people. It's Friday. Get it straight.
And despite rumors to the contrary, Rousey will be at the weigh-ins.
Who was even
There was rumors.
Who had the audacity to say that?
Well, I think there was a rumor going around that the weigh-ins would not be available to the public. It would be one of those closed-door weigh-ins type of things. But I think the UFC sees I'm not sure if it was a commission decision to not have a public weigh-in, but I think it was in New York, I believe, at the Albany show. But I know that they're going to have the public weigh-ins for this show.
I just can't imagine why they wouldn't, because Ronda Rousey weighing in is a big draw. I know. I've been to a couple.
Was it packed?
Yes.
Like standing, were you part of the media or just as a fan?
Just in the crowd, like they were cutting off letting people into the venue because they had only opened up half the seating and the seating was full.
Oh, wow. All right, so let's start at the beginning here with the prelims. And there's some... You want to be on this show if you're on the prelims. Like, Tim Means and Alex Oliveira, that's the first fight. That's crazy.
I don't know how many more times you can actually say it's crazy, because they have a marketing strategy to this. They're putting fights on Fight Pass to get people to subscribe to Fight Pass.
I mean, if you don't have Fight Pass, like, that's a fight that you at least give it worth a trial to see if you like the network based on this fight and all the library fights they have on there, because Means and Oliveira, that's worth the price of admission alone just for the Fight Pass.
Agreed.
And we go to the prelims here. I mean, Mike Pyle, Alex Garcia, Nico Price, Brandon Thatch. I mean, those two fights are pretty good. Antonio Carlos Jr. and Marvin Vittori. And Johnny Hendricks and Neil Magny. Are you kidding me, Stevie?
Well, I think given their career trajectory, that makes sense where it is, because Hendricks on the way down, Magny looking to reassert himself. I think I wouldn't put it anywhere else.
But my point on this fight is this. You're putting two fighters that are looking for a statement fight, correct?
Yeah.
And last time I checked, both these fighters in the past have shown they have power in both hands.
I think maybe Hendricks has shown that a little bit more, but Magny does have it when he needs it.
So, are we going to see 3 rounds of Rock'em Sock'em Robots here?
It would be conceivable, but it would also be conceivable that Hendricks could go back to his wrestling roots and just try to take him down over and over. You don't know.
And Magny doesn't have any wrestling roots?
No, I'm saying that wouldn't necessarily happen, but that doesn't mean Hendricks wouldn't try.
I just think of Magny's wrestling as... I would be very shocked if Hendricks doesn't respect the wrestling prowess of Magny in this fight.
I think you're probably...
Because I think Magny... Go ahead.
No, I think you're probably right, but go on.
I just think that Hendricks, over the last few fights, he's been on the losing end of the decisions more than likely. And more than not, sorry. And he's always struck me as a very intelligent fighter. Like, he's someone that I could see obsessively going over fight tapes and going over technique, and he's not a fighter that relies solely on one aspect of his fight game. And Magny, for me, he's just so dangerous when he was on top of his game, and now he's looking to prove himself. This is a fight that I really want to see, because when you have two fighters looking to, I don't want to say become relevant again, but two fighters looking for that comeback fight of the year, or comeback fight is a way to get back onto the winning track. This is a fight you don't want to miss.
I feel like it's more of a statement for Hendricks than it is for Magny, because, yeah, okay, he lost to Lorenz Larkin, but I don't feel like there's any shame in that, given the quality of an opponent Lorenz Larkin is. And before that, he had reeled off 3 really solid wins over Hector Lombard, Kelvin Gastelum, and Eric Silva. And the only other person he's lost to in the last 2 to 3 years is Damian Maia. And we know how dangerous Damian Maia is when he gets you on the ground. He is absolutely one of the biggest, baddest beasts of jiu-jitsu there has ever been in that weight class, and possibly all time. So no shame in either of those losses for Magny, whereas Hendricks, man, he is definitely on the downside of late. I would say even going as far back as when he fought the GSP title fight, where a lot of people thought, based on the amount of damage he did to GSP's face, that maybe he actually won and he didn't get the decision that night. I feel like it's kind of been downhill for him since then. He eked out a unanimous decision with Robbie Lawler the first time, lost the split decision the second time, and then since then, he's been TKO'd by Stephen Thompson and lost a unanimous decision to the aforementioned Kelvin Gastelum. So, I feel like Hendricks, with 3 losses in his last 4 in his last 6, I feel like his career of late is much more in trouble than Magny.
Let's move on to the main card, and we're going to start with Ray Borg and Louis Smolka.
All right, what are your thoughts on the fight?
I think Smolka has this fight. I don't think Borg wins this one.
I would tend to agree with you. I think Smolka's the better fighter of the two.
But, we always say, once that door closes, you never underestimate someone, especially the skill set that Borg has. I just think it's Smolka's fight to lose.
I would tend to agree with you there.
I had something clever here, and I'm not going to say what I originally wrote down in my notes here. I'm just going to say this is a coin flip fight between Dong Hung Kim and Tarek Safadine.
I think the Donger wins it.
You think so?
Yeah, I do.
Is it based on age, experience, what?
I would just call it his superior stun gun striking style.
So basically, you think he's going to rely on what brought him to the dance to beat a caliber fighter in Safadine?
I think so.
Well, I'm going to go coin flip, and I'm going to go devil's advocate on you, Stevie. I'm going to go with Safadine in this fight.
Well, that's your choice.
TJ Dillashaw and John Lineker in a fight that either could be really good or really bad if Dillashaw has his way against Lineker.
Well, Lineker does have a lot of power in his hands. They don't call him hands of stone for nothing, so I see upset potential in that.
Do you think Team Alpha... Is he still with Team Alpha Male, Dillashaw?
No. They very famously broke.
Yeah, they broke. That's what I thought. Okay. I wasn't... Because I remember they interviewed Dillashaw for the Faber fight, and I wasn't sure. I was like, wait a minute, is he back with Team Alpha Male? But I think it was more of a respect thing. Mm-hmm. I think Dillashaw wins this fight. I think Lineker, you're right. He definitely has power in both hands. I think Dillashaw is going to be well prepared for that, and I think Dillashaw is going to shoot for that takedown, and I think he's going to make Lineker look not bad, but I think he's going to expose him just a little bit here and get a decision victory here.
Maybe. I'll say this much. The only two people that Dillashaw's looked bad against are Assunção and Cruz, and he avenged the loss to Assunção. He has yet to solve the riddle of Cruz. And I guess a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, he did get
nice.
TKO'd by John Dodson. No, I wasn't going for the Rogue One reference there. It just happened. And by the way, rest in peace, Carrie Fisher.
Absolutely. Let's move on to Cruz and Garbrandt. And if you didn't see the unedited YouTube video, what are you waiting for?
Yeah, go watch it.
Holy crap. I undersold it after watching it. I remember told you about it last week on the show, and I was going to go see it, and I was like, I'm glad I did, but yeah, I undersold it. That was jaw on the ground. Like, you do know there's a camera in front of you, right? It's
honestly, my favorite line is still when Garbrandt said, "Who did you ever even beat?" And he said, "I beat all your teammates. I built a house beating your teammates."
That's the only thing Stevie can say from that interview. The rest was bleep worthy to the extreme.
Yeah.
Oh, and I'm not sure if he meant to, but was it just me, or was everything screaming at Cruz? And Cruz just sat there like he's ordering breakfast at the drive-thru at McDonald's. Like, that's whatever. I built, I did this and this.
That's what made it so epic, is that Garbrandt was losing his shit, and Cruz was just cool as a cucumber about the whole thing. That's what made it so much fun.
Does Garbrandt not remind you of Corey Graves just a little bit?
A little bit. The tattoos,
okay,
definitely.
Not just me, I thought that.
Yeah. The ink work, definitely.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so Cruz and Garbrandt for the bantamweight title. It's really hard. It's really fun to say this, but combined, these guys are at 32-1 record. Mm-hmm. That's pretty good. Pretty good there. I got Cruz winning though.
Yeah, as good as Cody Garbrandt is, we've seen this time and time again with Dominic Cruz. He is just a level above everybody that he faces. There's only one guy, and it was, again, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. One guy who ever really gave him fits, and it was in a different organization, and that was the first time around, way, way, way back when, for Faber and Cruz. And ever since then, Cruz has had his number, so it's just hard for me to imagine something Cody Garbrandt can do that all the other people who faced Dominic Cruz since that point haven't tried to do and failed.
I think Cruz is going to try his best to kind of fluster Garbrandt. And, Garbrandt, he can win this fight. No fighter is going to beat you 100% of the time. There's no way. What I'm thinking is that Cruz will not be stopped in the first round, and it will also not go to the judges. I see this fight going at least to the championship rounds, but I do see Cruz winning by stoppage.
I think so too.
And the main event, Amanda Nunes against Ronda Rousey for the women's bantamweight title. Stevie, this fight has been months in the making. This is the big comeback fight. And, boy, where do you start with this one?
Well, you start with the fact that Ronda Rousey seems to already have one foot out the door.
You think so?
Well, let's look at it from what we've seen of the Countdown special, the fact that she's not doing media anymore. I feel like if she loses, which realistically is a very strong possibility given Nunes is a very strong champion right now, I think Ronda looks at all these opportunities she's got in Hollywood, in professional wrestling, in just media of all different kinds. She could be an analyst. She could do anything she wants. She's already built a name and fame for herself. I feel like the lure to move away from being a fighter is very strong for her. And the thing that's hurting Rousey right now is that she just thinks I was dominant in the past, so I just need to go back to doing what I used to do and I'll be dominant again. She hasn't really changed anything. She hasn't changed how she trains, who she trains with, or her approach to training in any way. Whereas Nunes, the champ, has taken in with American Top Team, developed all the different traits that she needs to stay on top as the champion, is having coaching in every different aspect of her game from world-class instructors in all of those different disciplines. Jiu-jitsu, kickboxing, wrestling, striking. She is covering all the bases and trying all these things to make herself even better. Meanwhile, Ronda Rousey's just doing the same old same. So it makes me kind of leery of the idea that Ronda Rousey can really do better, because she was so dominant up to a point and then she got exposed. And if she wasn't willing to learn from that, how is she going to win now?
So the problem I have with this fight is this. Rousey wins this fight. Okay, she's got, what, 1 or 2 fights left in her contract? Mm-hmm. If she loses, she could always say, this is my last fight, and her last fight will be like a farewell fight like Faber. Or she wins the fight, fights the rematch against Nunes, because you have to think if she beats Nunes, there will be a rematch. And then, I mean, you're the champion. If she wins that fight as well, she could retire on top and do more movies, or she could be like, I got some more gas in the tank. This is going to be like the second, like version 2.0 or Ronda Rousey, so to speak. I don't see her, if she wins this fight on Friday, I don't think she will have one and done. I think if she wins this fight, she'll be around for 2 or 3 more fights. So another year and a half of Rousey. But Nunes, she's tough as nails.
Right.
And if Nunes can catch Rousey with one of those shots,
especially in the first round, yeah.
Yeah.
Because Nunes, we both know Nunes is always really, really good in the first round.
She's explosive. That is definitely true. And Rousey, if she loses here, she'd be like, what's the point? Like, at this point, what do I have now? I can just retire, pretend to get hit in the face on Roadhouse 2 or Roadhouse whatever, and be a Hollywood actress. And that's great for her. But Nunes is dialed in for this fight. I think she said it in one of the quotes that I read. She's been training for a fight against Rousey her whole career.
I think that's a fair way to put it.
So I'm waiting with bated breath for this fight. And if you want me to predict this fight, Stevie, this fight does not go to the second round. Your winner and still women's bantamweight champion is Amanda Nunes.
You know what? I agree with you on that.
I like Rousey. She's one of my favorites, but Nunes is just too strong.
What's weird to me, I pulled this up while you were going down your litany of things about the fight, and I'm looking at the odds right now in front of me. What's weird about this is Rousey is the minus 130 favorite. For all the reasons that you've already outlined and I've already outlined, I don't think the odds makers have this one right. I think
that'll change at weigh-in, though.
I think it will, too. I think that line could very easily flip. But as for the other lines, since we already talked about these other fights, Cruz minus 225, I like that one. Plus 185 if you're willing to gamble on Garbrandt. For Lineker and Dillashaw, minus 245 on Dillashaw. I think I like that line as well. Plus 205 on Lineker. The Donger is a smaller favorite than I would have expected over Tarek Safadine, minus 145 to plus 125, but you were kind of hinting that it was a coin flip, so I guess the odds makers agree with you there. And actually, Ray Borg is the favorite against Louis Smolka, but you and I both don't agree with that. We think Smolka's winning. And Neil Magny and Johnny Hendricks, 100% a coin flip with the odds makers, minus 115, minus 105.
Yeah, that one, it's going to be very entertaining because it's going to go one of two ways. It's not going to be a tight fight, that's for sure.
No.
Well, Stevie, that's UFC 207. Is there anything else you want to talk about, or do you want to plug anything for Thursday Night AMP this week?
I would actually rather briefly mention that the Rising tournament is also going on this week. King Mo Lawal is going over to Japan fresh off his win at Bellator 169 over Satoshi Ishii, and he's fighting Mirko Krokop.
Never heard of him. And the Gabby fight got changed on that card as well.
Yeah, she's got a new opponent, although I don't really think it's any less of a woman slaughter than it was before.
But it is a pro wrestler and someone who beat the original opponent in the past. So it's a tougher fight, but it's still a great mismatch.
Yeah, the size of Gabby Garcia and the fact that she's beating up women who are much older than her, I still don't like it. But it's Japan. This is what happens when you don't have commissions.
All right. Well, as we said, this is our 6-year anniversary show, and I just want to take this time here, as I do every year on this podcast at the anniversary day, to thank you, Stevie. I mean, we started this as a 3-man crew. It evolved to what it is now, and you would have told me 6 years ago that I would have able to cover UFC for the Observer, and we've talked to some great fighters on this show, great media members on this show. We had some interesting guests as well, but 6 years now, that's crazy.
That's why last week I went through the archives and I was thinking back on how long has Peter been involved in this site in one way or another. So I actually found the history before Glove Up or Shut Up. I went back to the Peter H. Reviews series, and I pulled up, I thought it was an especially timely episode of the Peter H. Reviews, because in December of 2010, you reviewed WrestleMania 10.
Yeah, I saw that on Twitter, and I looked at it for half a second. I was like, oh my god, he found it.
Took a little while. I had to up the audio quality to even post it on YouTube because it was recorded at a completely different bit rate.